Hi. Before I bring you into this recorded conversation, I wanted to give you fair warning that there were topics brought up that relate to politics. The purpose of these conversations are not related to what political group you should align with, but to address matters of the heart. Some matters of the heart end up applied to policies and written in black and white on a voter's ballot. When Kim describes her pain and frustration and associates those feelings with political opinions, it might require you to take a deep breath and recalibrate if those opinions are ones that you relate with, but you don't relate with how she experiences them. That's the thing with listening. It requires you to intake information and find a place for it within your own narrative, and sometimes the information doesn't fit. The reason we are highlighting voices of people of color in these sacred conversation videos is because we became aware that some people's voices weren't being heard, so our collaborative narrative had no place for their information. Things just didn't fit. Our aim is not to produce a specific action or belief on your part, but to give the Holy Spirit the opportunity to speak and correct where hardness or bias may have taken root. It could apply to any area of your life, but we're hoping especially to cultivate growth in the areas surrounding racial equality. Now, here's the recorded conversation with myself, Terri Reed, and her friend, Kim James.
All right, we're recording, and good afternoon, ladies. Good evening, Kim, who is coming from Virginia, my good friend, Kim James. I am here with Pastor Melissa Skinner, and we are just going to have a sacred conversation with my good friend and hear what God has laid on her heart. You know, we've been trying to make sense and hear the Lord on listening to someone who has a perspective or a different story than ours, and what God wants to do through that common understanding. And so I just thank you so much, Kim, for being here. Thank you, Melissa, for setting aside the time to have this conversation. So Kim, how are you doing in light of everything that has gone on this week? There's been a lot.
It's been a long week and it's only been since Wednesday, right? But it's discouraging in a way because I thought I had to commit months of 2020 just trying to get over the trauma of what happened earlier in the year and how to figure out how to navigate a work environment and my community and my relationships across cultural boundaries to create a new normal that still was not making real progress, in these areas. When everything happened in the springtime or the summer, I had such a breakdown because that was the moment that I realized that I had been holding my breath my whole 48 years of life, So when I got to the point, when we all got to the point that we could actually say out loud and be who we are and feel how we felt about things out loud, it was a relief, but obviously a lot comes with that as well. Because then once you say it, what do you have to do with it, right?
Right. And obviously you're talking about the murder of George Floyd and all
the others
murders that had come up prior to that. And so when you recognized that you were holding your breath, when was that? You were saying we were now able to talk about it. We were now able to speak about it.
It wasn't until I watched the tape and watched him say out loud, "I can't breathe," that it gave a voice and a visual to the knots that have been in my chest as a mother of two Black sons, and and the daughter of parents whose crosses have been burned in my parents' yards, 10 miles up the street from here where they grew up, So it was just a lot to unload, at once. And the mother load just of emotions, just came out. And obviously it came out as anger. Um, Besides the grief, a lot of anger, particularly because it's hard to see how many people are looking at the same thing and can still find ways to justify or excuse or downplay the seriousness of. And we were only talking about the racial injustice regarding those murders, not everything else that's woven into our everyday lives and interactions and livelihoods and family dynamics, and all of those things. So, like I said, it took several months and a lot of dedicated effort on my part to calm down enough to be able to give grace to the people that I felt were trying, um, and give grace to myself about my own emotional state and volatility. You know, when I still had a short fuse over things, um, had to be very careful not turning that energy towards my family, because there was still a lot of other personal things, going on. And that's what tends to happen when we're all in that pot and things are tense all the time and you have all these outside things. It obviously has to be exist inside your family dynamic too, because where else are you going to emote or let it out, so it shows itself in ways that aren't healthy, in your own families too. So with two teenage sons that I was trying to help them manage their own emotions about all of it, it took a lot to try to get past that. And I thought I had. I spent 3 months literally just studying forgiveness. And that made a big difference for me. And I felt like I was gaining such great peace. And was at a point like, okay, fresh year, fresh start. Let's do this. It's gonna be better. You know, my birthday was on Sunday, and 3 days later, here we are. With this all over again, and it just brought back all of that old stuff and more. Because in our shoes, when you see the manifestation that you saw coming for a long time, and you could have said it was going to happen exactly this way till you're blue in the face, and everybody's just like, oh, no, it's fine. It's really not what it seems. And that's just talk. It doesn't really matter, or this, that, and the other. And then you're actually watching it. The whole world is watching it happen. To see other people act like what they were doing was just people being stupid, um, and did not see it as anything related to race whatsoever.
Kim, can I
Sure.
can I interrupt for just a second? Just because I don't know when this video will be put out, I wanted to give a little reference for what we're referring to as far as what happened this week,
Right.
we could feel kind of lost otherwise. So I'll put it in very, very simple words, and then because I would love if you were reflecting on what it means to you or other people of color. So today or this week on Wednesday, while I don't know what the technical term for it, but while they were signing papers about the president
Certifying the election.
thank you, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
certifying the election, many protesters came to the scene and went into the Capitol building and wreaked havoc. That's like the very most basic skeleton of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to point out, because I think many people, if they don't have a real finger on the gauge or whatever, they could say, well, everyone's been protesting this year. What's the difference? Portland, the Capitol, like let's say one political party may have made their voice heard in one way, and then another political party made their voice heard in another way, and they could just see it like samey, we just have a passionate country, whatever. So I don't see it that way, but I just wanted to give the basic landscape that
Context, yeah.
everything you say has a place to land.
Okay, thank you. So yes, what was it, January 6th
Yeah.
of 2021? And let me add that I live in the Washington, D.C. area.
Mhm.
So it's not like you can be removed enough that you're watching that on TV and think that it's not going to touch you. You know, it immediately made me have to stop what I was doing and tell my kids, you're not leaving the house. You can't even take your car to go get gas or go to 7-Eleven. If you have to leave to get to school for my son plays basketball, for practice, you don't talk to anyone. You don't look at anyone any way that somebody can take that and interpret it as you instigating, any type of conflict. We don't know. It's literally 20 minutes up the street where everything is, going crazy. So we don't know if the houses, our neighbors here are people who believe in, what was going on or supported that. Or if they have their own agendas. We don't know if those people started making their way out of the cities and just targeting people, in their neighborhoods or in their homes. So I had to stop and kind of put those things in place just for our immediate safety, or concern, let alone the emotional baggage that came back from all of the stuff that, happened earlier in the year. So.
And like Melissa had mentioned, for some people to describe it one way, like people are passionate, they have a right to protest. People are passionate, they do have a right to protest. But can you speak to, I know that we've had conversations about this. Can you speak to why it is different, why it was different, why it felt different, especially being so close, feeling like you said, you can't escape it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very near. It's very geographically near.
Yeah. So first, in this country, we've made it a habit to turn everything political. And being Black isn't political, right?
Right.
But certain people can look at Black people or minorities just trying to stand up for human rights or our basic safety, turn that into a political issue because they can find a way to spin it. Or you can find a way to politicize anything, basically, and so the reason that it's different is, forget the organization Black Lives Matter. I am a Black person, and my life needs to matter to people other than me and my immediate family. It really has nothing to do with an organization that gave itself that name, or whatever, trying to continue or push on that effort. Everything was politicized with Colin Kaepernick, taking the knee. That was making a statement because politically, policies and the way that this country functions, those systems are in place to protect police that kill Black people disproportionately. And he used his platform, and his status as a public figure to make a bold statement in a peaceful protest to raise awareness to that issue, you know. But when it got to the point that all of us, many of us, were in the streets regarding what happened with George Floyd and, you know, and all of the others, that became a life or death for many of us, or for all of us. I mean, it's taken us back to, okay, so the MAGA, Make America Great Again. Let's break down, what does that actually mean, right? So make it great again means that it's not great now, and they're trying to go back to some euphoric state or time where they felt everything worked perfectly for them, economically, socially, whatever that means, right? So if you're not a white person in America, that time historically was when Black people were slaves, or, you know, in Jim Crow era, when we were able to be kept out of your restaurants, your places of business, can't live in your neighborhood, can't, you know, own any of the same things that you do, would get rejected, couldn't even purchase a home, you know, all of those things that were set in place. And when they were justified in being able to kill us if we stepped out of line, you know, or to keep us in our place when we stepped out of line, that interfered with their ability to have their happy, comfortable bubble, you know.
Do you think too, because I've been thinking about this in a family full of veterans, and I have heard different takes from veterans, Black and white, about what Colin Kaepernick was doing was not unpatriotic whatsoever. He had actually
Right.
talked to veterans groups about it before.
Right. He asked
That was
them what
really
was the most respectful way to take the stance, and a veteran told him to take the knee, because that's what we do when somebody is injured on a field or someone is killed. You lower a flag, you take a knee. So he did that in the most respectful way. But again, it was turned into, how dare they disrespect the flag? Well, look what happened this week. They were taking the flag and, you know, and waving it with Trump flags, which is idolatry in itself, you know, and holding up signs that are saying in the name of God, you know. And so they've taken all of these pieces and put it together like it's their God-given right to take back the rights that they had before we had any. And that's why the whole slogan of Make America Great Again is so offensive to people of color, because that means you still want a world that I'm only good enough to take care of your children, clean your house, and shine your shoes.
Mm.
And we have spent our entire lifetime trying to get away from that. And, you know, it's the work twice as hard to get half as far. And then to still feel like there's a slap in your face by idolizing a president or any person that eggs on those thoughts and those feelings and those ideas, saying, you're right, you have every right to feel that way, this is your country, you can do with it, you know, what you want to, we're going to get back to that thing. And it just keeps us in a state of tenseness and, you know, intensity at all times.
Go ahead, Melissa.
So I can hear and understand the concept of, especially for a whole people group that have worked so hard to move forward, because what is behind is so atrocious, and each step feels like a relief of one more thing. Like anytime there's progress, it's a relief from something that was ugly, you know? And so any kind of slogan that calls back to the past as better, obviously, like what you would focus on most of the time is that the past needs to go and we need to go forward. And so of course, I associate those two things. I also wanted to, not as an argument point, but as a talking point. I know that many people, like I don't know anyone really that supports Donald Trump who wants, let's say, you to shine their shoes. You know, let's just break it down. It's not a bunch of people saying I would like a Black person for myself or something. You know, um, so but it like I think the things that they're connecting with the past is like a general sense of morality, or when everybody seemed, because everybody is whoever you're exposed to, who everybody that they saw had a common thought of what is good and bad, and you could tell who the bad guys were and you could tell who the good guys were, and we didn't have this, you know, fuzzy truth, and there was more Bible involved and less, more rules being followed and order and things like that. And I think that when they go toward that in thought, like I appreciate wanting those things, but I think that what might be missing, I'm not trying to tell you this, Kim, I'm trying to process out loud.
Right.
I think what they're trying to connect is something where they don't realize what was attached to those things. There was law and order because you could control certain groups of people through social pressure or laws or whatever. They didn't know. It's like, I don't think some people can know the cost at which they had these things that felt so comfortable.
Yeah, I agree with that. I let's see. I hate, maybe it was the wrong choice of words, when you try to simplify and say, shine your shoes and clean your house, those were the things, there were certain job types that we were allowed to do in my parents' generation, or my grandparents' generation to make an honest living, or whatever that was. And so, just trying to get into professional work environments, in corporate America and all of those things, or even holding political seats, all of that, were things that it became the norm or the standard that that's not something that we were allowed to do. So whether you saw it or not, there's always stuff happening behind the scenes or in the boardrooms that's preventing those things from happening, that most people from their naked eye don't see, because you don't have a reason to look for it or pay attention to it. So all of those things were always there. And I know you're saying, look back to the day where things seemed simple and there was law and order. Was it really? Because it really wasn't any different than it is now. It's just that now people have cameras and they're capturing the things and posting it publicly for people to see what's been happening to us quietly, and that police and people have been getting away with all of this time, up until now. If you didn't have a reason to look for it or ask about it, you would never know. And if it doesn't impact your own life or well-being, then it didn't matter. So that status quo, of what appeared to be good Christian values and all of that, was it real or was it pretend?
Well, that's to your point. I think that's a great point. And we keep staying with the greatness of America. I won't say make America great. They stick with the greatness of America. And I remember hearing, so much of my family are veterans. My sister served, my dad served in Vietnam in the Marines, my grandpa in World War II and was injured in World War II. And they've all, we hold their status in high regard. Kim, I know that you're stepdad, right?
Mhm.
And he had a really great job, right? And I look at these veterans and I always weigh patriotism, because right now where some people are like, you know, patriotism truly to some people is raising a flag. And in this day and age, patriotism in some regards is wearing a mask. And there are people all over, you know, that would say, you know, I appreciate the flag, I appreciate the sacrifice. But what I hear you both speaking to is the fact that those better times, quote unquote, were better for some of us.
Mhm.
But the land of the free and the home of the brave uh, falls on some of us too, not all of us. And so our experiences are so different that some people want to go back to that time where our country fought together. Right now, we're so divided. It feels that when our country fought together, in my lack of understanding Kim's story, I could easily say, where has our country gone? And be completely naive of the pain and the heartache that other people have felt, because I don't know what I don't know. And now that I'm beginning to see what I haven't known, and I'm saying this to anyone who is listening as a white middle-aged female, as Kim's boys have described me before, and I'm okay with that. That I really couldn't know what I couldn't know until my eyes have been opened to some things that now I can't unsee, and I can't not hear and listen to. And as I meet people like Kim and so many others that have taught me so much and been willing to teach me in their exhaustion, when they can, I appreciate that so much. And the Langston Hughes poem about America, and the line that says, the land that, you know, make America great, the land that never has been yet. And I really feel like that resonates with me, that we've never seen what this land was intended. We have the potential of having a great country. We're not there. We have a lot of work to do. And so
Thank you for saying that. But even touching on the service, when we fought together, if you really did your homework on the military and all of that, the ones that looked like us were the ones that were put on the front lines to die first, to buy more time, you know, for the others. So even that appearance of fighting together was never equal, you know, or equitable, you know, in that sense. But I remember telling you when we talked in the summertime or whenever things got really heated, that things were going to settle down, and that it was going to be several months, maybe a year before white people really started to see, as things were changing, like as laws were starting to change to try to balance things and make things more fair. It wasn't going to be until white people started seeing how that impacts the things that they've always had, until they start to get angry and start to understand what the difference is, or what white privilege actually means. You know, a lot of people say, well, I was poor, I didn't have privilege. You have privilege just in the fact that you can walk out your house in a hood and not have to look over your shoulder and be afraid of not being able to come home. Every single person that went to that Capitol and were busting in those buildings, even if you watch the videos of them proud of what they were doing. The one woman was talking about, I got tear gassed, you know, in the middle of my revolution, you know, like, this is my right. We've been waiting for this. They had no fear of consequences whatsoever to go in there and do what they did, because they don't live in the world that the cops are their enemy or that the cops target them. they own the cops. The cops do what they ask or what they say to do. So, it was traumatic just watching the Black police officer inside the Capitol running away from the mob of people instead of trying to, keep them at bay, because he knew he's the one that's going to die in that situation, not any of them. And if he did draw his weapon, he would have been totally justified in that situation with a mob of people rushing him in that building. But he didn't do that. And they still, totally, because that attitude is that this is mine. It's my right. I can do whatever the heck I want to do. But when it's on the other side, no, you can't do that. It would have been a sea of dead bodies if those had been Black people in that exact same situation. And I think someone shared the other day, it's a shame that this had to happen for us to learn police are actually capable of restraint in a volatile situation. Yet they use as an excuse that to kill us, that it's life or death, or they did it because they were afraid for their own life. Well, what you saw 3 days ago, is a prime example that they were in a situation that these people had weapons too. They're literally busting the windows and all of that, violated things in every way. And no one questioned it. Even at 6 o'clock when they said the curfew was set, and they're like, we're going to start arresting people at 6 o'clock. If you're not, they still just stood there and held a line and were like, go home. Really?
Yeah.
Just
I
go
heard,
home. You have
I
the
heard
freedom to just
some
go home.
statistics. We had talked about that I was in my lack of understanding, and I say this as someone who, in my own privilege, and I know some people might be uncomfortable with that word, but in my own privilege, because I'm unaware of some of the things um, that don't make sense in my own mind. Hearing someone say, "We love you, go home," and I'm thinking, people of color are upset because the president is saying, I love you, after they've, broken the law. And what was coming out in my naivety, and I'll just say this for anyone who will listen to this, is that wasn't the most concerning thing. It was that you can break into a Capitol building, a federal offense, and then be told by the highest power, now just go home, when you'd be arrested and charged. That is what should happen. That's what needs to happen when something like that occurs. And yet it's just so, there's just no equity, right?
And
There's
we don't even get the
not even
luxury of
close.
making it home alive to deal with it legally in most cases. They were showing pictures of, at the Lincoln Memorial, there were soldiers full of armed people, during the Black Lives Matter protest. Yet you showed these people at the Capitol. The cops are actually opening up the gates and taking selfies with some of these people, as they were going in. And, yeah, some broke windows, but they largely were let in. And, now it's my next door neighbor works. He was deployed down there in it. He's security, I guess, at the White House or something like that. But, they were all saying it had to have also been part of a plot, like an inside job, because some of the places that they got access to, and people's offices and things they were sitting in, were places that the common person just can't walk in and know that you're at Nancy Pelosi's desk, with your feet up and that type of stuff. So there had to be something on the inside or something planned ahead of time that helped them navigate once they were inside, to get to some of the places and do some of the things that they were doing. But when Virginia, at UVA, when in Charlottesville, when that thing happened, and it was the Klan. Even then, these were very fine people, and and it was just always something to justify their behavior or their goodness. But if anybody was protesting, even completely peacefully, we're thugs and criminals, and it's just sickening. Um, it's just sickening on a daily basis. And even in my work environment, I'm on the leadership team at my company. There's only 8 of us. I'm the only Black person, in the group. There's really only 3 people, Black people in the company of almost 60 or whatever. But even then, they still find a way to shut down my voice because they're like, we don't want to have to hear about it. We're busy, it's too much work to do. Can't we deal with this or talk about this another time? But they don't even notice the trauma on my face and my inability sometimes to just make it through the day, let alone the meeting, and be emotionally present for the things that we have to talk about. And we had a client yesterday to send an email that said, I trust that no one in this company supports or condones the behavior, or what's been going on there. And I need to know what your stance is as a company and the individual people working on the team, where they stand on these issues. Because as a veteran, I will not let you in my house. We're a remodeling firm, if anyone. And so I had to bring that up as an issue in our leadership meeting. And even then, people were real quiet and real careful, trying to tiptoe around the way to respond to them picking apart the words that the man used in his email to try to use semantics to find a way to spin it so that they didn't have to actually state whether you were for or against this. And at the end of the day, if you say, I don't support this, but if there's a but in it at all, you're making an excuse for it or condoning it in some way. Even if you say, I don't, yeah, they shouldn't have busted the windows of the Capitol. The fact that you were there in the first place means that you bought into the whole notion or conspiracy theories that made this whole election process a fraud, because for the first time in American history, Black people, or all of the people who are poor and have never been able to afford to be off of work long enough to stand in a line for the whole day, if it meant that they weren't going to eat or they would get evicted, then they don't go vote. But now with the mail-in voting, and things like that, it finally almost leveled the playing field so that everybody who wanted to vote and was eligible to vote got to. And then you take all of this and say, well, it couldn't be real that all of these people don't want me to be the president, if it must be a fraud. They must be dead people voting or fake, this, that, and the other, just because I didn't win. Like, so many intelligent, regular people bought into that theory. And it's offensive to me because that means you think my vote shouldn't matter. My ability or my right to actually vote and cast a ballot doesn't matter. Because they did all of these investigations, right? And they still proved that if there was anything that was fraudulent, it was less than 1%, and it would not have impacted the outcome of it anyway. And if there was, it could have been in his favor just as much as it could have been in Biden's favor. And it doesn't even mean that most of us love Biden. We just want to see some progress towards fairness and equity and human kindness, and decency, and I know, Melissa, you were saying earlier about the good old fashioned values and the Christian values, but a lot of that has been taken and twisted to justify stances, on issues that obviously it turns it into politics, but it really shouldn't be, you know? It's like, okay, there are people say, well, I only vote this way over abortion. I get it, about abortion. However, right to life is womb to the tomb. So how can you say I can't vote for something that supports a person's right to have an abortion, and then in the same breath say I fight for my right to own a gun so I can shoot you and kill you if you stepped on my property or you looked at me the wrong way, and you make a decision that you think you're threatened enough to take somebody else's life? Like, those things can't exist together. Either you care about preserving human life, whatever that looks like at all costs, or you don't. So there's contradictions in values that are justified by biblical, principle and words. There's a whole lot of people that might vote Democratic um, because they believe in caring for the poor and those less fortunate, and it's less about defending, abortion or gay rights or this, that, and whatever people choose to be offended over. All I know is the Bible says you're supposed to love each other. And, and loving somebody, loving everybody where they are and who they are, means that we can't demonize everybody for not being exactly how we are and thinking exactly how we are, because you don't know people's experiences and where they came from and what they're fighting through just to try to survive. I mean, I was sexually abused for 16 years of my life, and I can trace back 5 generations, and it could take you onto the plantation where the slave master raped my great 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 grandmother and started the seed of incest in our family line, where he sold, after he fathered 6 children by my grandmother, and then she was almost beaten to death by his wife because she knew those kids were half white and that they came from him, but she couldn't address it with him. So she would tie her to a tree and beat her till she passed out, claiming that it was because she didn't cook something good enough or clean something good enough. But then once emancipation happened, he gave property to a Black man as a bribe to legitimize and claim paternity of those children, so that he didn't have to take any responsibility for that. And that man had no love or loyalty to that family. It was a business deal for him, so that history of abuse just started trickling down, and that generational curse passed through the family lines. That's most Black families that have come through slavery. So we disproportionately have been in the bondage of sexual abuse, because we were property, we weren't people. Back then we were inbred to create more kids so you could have more labor, so that you didn't have to pay any more money to get another slave, and our families were ripped apart. We were taught and socialized to not have emotion or emotional attachment to our loved ones, and that sex was a weapon or power, not emotional intimacy. So, you take that in a lifetime of trauma, and we're just abusing each other over and over and over again. And then they look at us now like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you get it together? And it was set up from the beginning for us to fail, to never be able to, survive that. And we just have been in survival mode, just trying to get by. Just trying to survive, let alone actually thrive. So to feel like we're at a place now that, oh, things came out, we can talk about the truth, we can share our stories, and how things actually came to be. And maybe things are actually going to change. And then we like, whew, we get to breathe for a second. And then it comes right back. Again, it's like, is it ever going to get better? And I have to fight myself all the time to pray my way through it and say, God, show me what you're doing in this. And please show me at some point that there actually is going to be justice. Please show me that there's actually going to be some sort of restitution or restoration here, because this can't be the best that there is for me and for my children, and for us as a people. It just can't stay this way forever.
And when I hear you describing the history, Kim, and your connection to it, for one thing, from a personal note, that's one thing that made the biggest impact for me, was to see the actual connection between past and present, because I just thought it was like something that happened a long time ago, and then maybe now people are still sad about it or something, which is, that wouldn't be enough to make people feel oppressed. That would just be a sadness and you could work through it or whatever. But what I wanted to just say out loud for anyone viewing is that I don't hear you saying, and this is my excuse, and so I never try, or this is my my license to stay bitter and to put the keys to my success in someone else's hand, and it's not my fault, or whatever. I don't hear you saying that you're disempowered. Well, it can disempower. It can make steps to disempower you, but nothing can take away your, I don't know, I probably went down the wrong sentence there, but what I hear you saying is that you're climbing a big mountain. You're not saying you're sitting at the bottom and someone else needs to fix it for you. You're climbing a big mountain and you're working hard, and that your effort will look different because you're climbing a different mountain than someone who doesn't have that mountain.
Right.
And yeah, you don't need my validation. I just wanted to kind of put words into where I might hear people hearing you, and I want to make sure they're not hearing you through a filter that is inaccurate.
And you always do that so nicely, Melissa.
Yeah.
You always think ahead. I love how your mind works that way too. And I will say too, Kim, because I know you, we are involved in groups together, and I've heard you, speak on what God is speaking to you. I've seen you be wisdom in the room, even when it comes to race and faith, where there are emotions on all sides, because I'm learning that it's not two sides. It's very much all sides based on our perspective and our understanding. But I have very much heard you both be compelled and tired at times, weary at times, because this has been, like Melissa was saying, such a mountain. And I have equally heard you where people have who are equally weary and saying, I'm tired, when my white friends or white people in general ask me, so what can I do? Or can you get me information on that so I can understand? And they're like, I'm tired. I want you to search it out for yourself, do some historical research, make sure what you're reading doesn't just reinforce what you already believe, make sure you're getting wisdom. And I have heard you say so many times, you have really been that bridge builder to say, I will share. So, I still have a little bit of energy at times. And again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I have heard you even this week say, but I want to make sure that the person is getting the right information. If they're seeking a source that may not be accurate, if they're going to ask me, I'm going to share with them. And so I just applaud you in that, because I don't know your exhaustion. I don't know that pain, but we sure appreciate you, sharing all of that with us so candidly. and also having a heart that you trust and love God, and the theme in the Bible is justice. So what do those next steps for the church look like?
You know, it's hard for us, and I think we have to stay the course and trust that even through the ugly, that there's going to be some light, you know, that comes out of it on the other side. But I think it's harder for you all because, and I really had to pray for God to give me the ability to find some compassion and empathy for the position that you all are in, because many of you, you know, you're not racist. You're not the gun toting, Confederate flag hanging, you know, type of people. However, it has to be traumatic in itself to come to a realization that everything that you were taught about the world, about, you know, your life, even about your faith, about your interpretation of what you were taught of what the Bible says and means, that it was not all presented to you correctly, you know, and that there's a lot of stuff that needs to be unraveled and undone to be able to even be open to hearing truth, a different layer of truth. And then it's going to take a different level of commitment and courage to live in it. Because even though you might not, Terri, be the one that has that in your heart, you might have relatives that do. And how do you learn to exist in your own family, in your own circles, when you know and love people that are not going to be open to seeing things differently? And now that your eyes are open, you can't, like you said, you can't unsee it. And what are you going to do different? Like, it's going to challenge you all differently on a daily basis to stay committed when it's not comfortable, to stay the course, you know, in changing things yourself. Because like I told, I think everybody, we can't change this, only you can. I mean, God can change it, but he's going to change it through people, right? And white people are only going to listen to other white people.
No, we're not.
Certain things. You might hear me. You might hear my story. You might find some compassion for what I've experienced. But at the end of the day, you guys are going to be in the boardrooms and in, you know, churches and in places amongst yourselves without people that look like us, that are not going to be there pushing the button to make you or remind you to make the right decision or to try to keep pushing things forward in that direction of progress. And it's going to be super easy to try to keep things the status quo, for the sake of your own comfort and your own peace of mind, you know, so to speak. So it's going to be a much harder journey for you. And that's why I've had to decide I have to just step back and give grace and let you process things, you know, some people at your own level and your own pace. If you ask me, I'm going to share it. If you do something blatantly, you know, wrong, I'm going to call it out. But otherwise, I can't force you to want to grow. I can't force you to want to change, because I just don't think everyone understands to what extent it is interwoven in every part of our lives and how it impacts what you have learned to be your comfort level and your sense of security, you know, and safety and all of that. So that's what I'm constantly working on, and trying to be the bridge and not the bridge burner. If we had had this conversation yesterday, I'd have been more on the Bernie side than the bridgy side, you know. But again, I have to pray through all of that and say, am I going to actually be somebody that's a part of the solution? because it can't stay this way for my kids. I can't tell my kids you can be and do anything you want to be. You are a blessed man of God. You've got a mantle on your life. You've got all this ahead of you. And then say, but you can't walk up the street, but you can't drive your car because, you can't teach them hope and then deal with the realities and fear for their safety and feeling like there's always going to be somebody keeping them from being able to pursue those dreams, and things like everyone else can. So it's tough, but we're all going to just take it a day at a time and keep going, do what we can do.
Well, thank you. Melissa, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask him about or bring up?
I think so. Something I wanted to point out, I don't know if I might even want to make a little blurb to put at the beginning of this or something, because as a church, we aren't officially, we really need to not, let's say, endorse a candidate or de-endorse a candidate, just legally. And I really appreciate what you brought up, Kim, saying that some things aren't political. Even if you can vote on something, it doesn't necessarily make all of the aspects of that topic a political aspect.
Right.
Yeah.
It's some of it is just human.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to give, I don't want to sound like it's a disclaimer, but I want to give a filter for people watching who, because I love and appreciate anyone in whatever kind of government system that they want the most. Like everyone at our church that I've ever met has been loving people who want, like they're all trying to make decisions on how do I fulfill this love that God gives me and how I want the country to run and how I want my city to run and my church to run or whatever. So I'm not dealing with people like people who want bad or people who want good. It's not like that. It's so I wanted to encourage people to try to separate the let's say the political party or the political person that they might support
Right.
with the experience of Kim and how certain things affect her or how she experiences the outcomes of certain votes or how she experiences the outcomes of certain, let's say, political slogans. So I'm not going to say that it's evil to say make America great again. I am willing to give Kim a microphone and say, how does that affect you? Or what does that call toward in your experience?
Right.
So this isn't as much of a disclaimer or like, let's just let every perspective be have the equal footing or whatever, as much as I want to say, please try and listen through the things that happen to relate to politics and hear the person and the people and the joint experience that especially Kim and anyone that we've interviewed is representing. It is going to be more common if we're interviewing people of color. There will be less, let's say, Republican people that we're recording because that's how statistically it lands. And so I'm not pushing for any political party, but when Kim is sharing her experience, it's going to come from we're listening to why she believes what she believes or why she feels what she feels or whatever.
And let me also add, I'm not pushing any Democrat or Republican agenda either.
Mm-hmm.
If Joe Biden, if Mitt Romney, if anybody demonstrated more character, more godly character than who's currently occupying the White House, that's who I would vote for, regardless of whether they were Democrat or Republican or whatever. We just want to be treated decently, like I cried on Wednesday and I just said, God, do they hate us that much that they could resort to this? They hate looking at me or what I represent to them that much that they would go to such great lengths to to take the stand or whatever and what do I do with that? How do I process that?
And again, to people who don't understand Kim's comment about how that even applies, where there's this direct correlation to what happened, right, on Wednesday, and you feel it, that it does directly affect you, Kim. I just encourage what Melissa was saying about really, really listening, because I will say too, there were images of nooses, right?
Yep.
And things that are very extreme. I mean, to say triggering is so baseline, right? But to see those images,
Did you say nooses?
Nooses were
nooses
hanging outside
were
of the
hanging.
Capitol.
And to see images like that is so terrifying, triggering, horrifying. I'll say horrifying for people. So again, I just encourage people to listen through maybe what they know or don't know about, and maybe what we all know or don't know about what occurred on Wednesday, and how for some there is such a direct correlation to the inequities and injustices concerning the color of our skin. So,
Yeah.
and again, thank you both for bringing up the fact that although we use words like Republican or Democrat and talk about values like security or safety, and that feels like it falls as a Republican value, and many people feel that, people on the Democratic side would also say, hey, safety and security are important to
It
me.
mattered to me too.
Right. They matter. They definitely matter to me too. And I do believe, as I look at both parties, and there are many more than just two parties, obviously, but there are pieces of, and I will say this, even with the horrifying things that we've seen, there are pieces of the heart of God and the values given because God gives us values and gifts as the body of Christ. And it comes out passionately in other ways. Now we are to love, and that is our anchor, that Christ is our anchor. But it does come out just because I feel strongly, like Kim, like you were saying, to feed the poor, I would hope that someone else could look at a different value, maybe even across the aisle, but not see it as across the aisle, and just say that's a gift of the heart of God in you, and champion it and applaud it, and not finger point it. But to hear Kim's story, we have got to lean in and listen to voices that we haven't heard. And again, going back to scripture, I just believe so strongly that Jesus really did come to give voice to the voiceless, not to amplify the powerful. We don't need that. So I'm just really, I'm interested, continually interested, perpetually interested in that Micah 6:8 verse on really what doing justly, loving mercy or loving kindness, and walking humbly, what that picture as a whole really looks like going forward. So,
Amen.
Yeah. Last thoughts before we close this up. Thank you so much both for your time and your thoughts and considerations.
How are you doing, Kim?
I think I would say, you kind of did a little plug, Terri, about people doing their own homework, and reading stuff and, getting diverse information. Everybody says, I have that one Black friend that I might ask questions, or whatever too. But I would say spend time actually caring about hearing people's personal stories and experiences, because you can read facts and figures and historical data and things all you want, but you don't actually, it doesn't feel real, to something that you can relate to that will inspire you to do something different than if it's somebody that you might personally know or care about. Um, and like, oh, that really happened to you? Like you? Okay, then maybe I'm going to hear that different. And that may be the thing that opens them to hear the next thing different, or ask someone else that they're less likely to, if you're riding a bus, can in COVID, but, and you're sitting next to somebody who's does not look like you or whatever, don't just bury your head, spark a conversation. You'd be surprised what you learn about other people's backgrounds. And it's so not just a black and white thing, you know, so many other cultures and stuff too that we need to know and hear their stories, um, and their backgrounds too.
Expanding what us means.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. And be intentional about engaging, putting yourself out there to engage in conversations like that it doesn't always necessarily have to go to some gruesome, painful, traumatic story, but you'd be surprised. And, and don't think it's only one-sided. I want to hear your stories too. I want to know how you got to be 47 something years old and you had no clue.
Right.
That this didn't exist or this, and all this stuff. Like, to me, it blows my mind. Like, how could you possibly not know? But it has shown me there literally are alternate realities, with different people depending on where you grew up and what you were taught. Someone shared with me, I wasn't taught that, this and this about Blacks or whatever in school. You're right, because they omitted all of that part from the books. Because they only teach the part in schools that favors or glorifies this one particular way that things happened or we got here, but, and, that collided for my son in 5th grade when they were taken to a plantation for a field trip for George Mason. And it's George Mason, he signed the, declaration of this or this. And my Black son, the 5th grader, was taken onto the plantation and they were walking them through the slave quarters like it was this cool thing. You could pick some cotton and take it home with you as a souvenir, type of thing. Well, it turned out that we actually had ancestors that were slaves on that plantation. And Quentin felt it in his spirit. And he came home completely distraught. And he was like, George Mason was a hypocrite, But I went back to the school and I challenged the all-white school system here to address that and to open it so that there could be discussions that are sensitive to kids, from various backgrounds to be able to be taught a more balanced, experience or truth about what's happening. So, and that wouldn't happen if people didn't have the courage to step out of their little bubble,
Yeah.
and poke the bear.
Thank you for your not just your courage to do that, because I know that about you, but also just your heart and your vulnerability to share, your story and parts of your story that are really, really painful. And to your point as to why we're having these sacred conversations, because sharing our stories and listening to another story who doesn't look like us or whose experience doesn't reflect our own really does help us to be more us and not us versus them. So Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Kim James. Thank you, Pastor Melissa Skinner. And thank you, Fifth Avenue. I hope you listen in. Thanks.